Hello and welcome to HUDL Up, the podcast from HUDL, where we're holding space for real stories, shared power and collective change. HUDL works alongside young people, organisations and communities to create fairer systems and better opportunities, not just for young people, but with them. And this podcast is where those stories come to life. Each episode we'll hear from young leaders, practitioners and partners who are reshaping the way decisions are made and how programmes are designed. Together, we'll explore what it takes to build equitable partnerships, meaningfully share power, and create change that lasts. We believe that when young people are involved at every stage, from design to decision-making to delivery, systems become fairer and communities become stronger. So let's huddle up and get started with today's episode and welcome our guests from the Future Communities Collective, Suranne, Phoebe, Ladajah and Fatima. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. Hey. Hi, everyone. How are we all feeling today?
Really excited.
Yeah. Are we ready to get into the convo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, for our listeners who don't know what the Future Communities Collective is, can I invite someone to basically say what is the Future Communities Collective and what is your role within the Future Communities Collective?
I'm happy to take this. So we're a group of, I don't know how many we are now, but over 10, but under 15. We are a group of young people who work with the Co-op Foundation, which is like the charity side of the Co-op. And we are involved in grant making and making sort of decisions when it comes to funding and who we fund and things like that. But we also have been given the opportunity to sort of build the fund and design it, which is something that was really unique for us. And the opportunity to get involved with multiple other projects as well within the Co-op Foundation. So we've had the opportunity to join comms, to join different funds than the one that we're working on now. And yeah, it's a really cool group and we've all become really good friends and it's been a brilliant opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you, Phoebe. So the purpose of today's conversation is all about grant making and power sharing and lived experience and what does that actually mean. And we're also going to be spending some time talking about trauma-informed practices and how to make spaces like this accessible. So the first question I want to throw out to you all is, when you think about grant making, what did you assume it was going to be before you were involved in it?
I'll take that if that's all right.
Thanks, Fatima.
I think, typically you associate it with being a really formal space, one that's quite inaccessible, one that's not made for someone like me, and I think one that's not sort of designed for young people. I think of suits. I think of sort of people suited and booted, quite professional, quite formal, a lot of jargon. And I think that's just not at all what it's been like for us. I think it's been the complete opposite. But the sort of assumption I had going in was that it was quite scary and unfamiliar and a space that wasn't really welcome for me or people like me.
And can I ask, Fatima, you mentioned someone like me. What does that, when you say that, what do you mean by that?
I think just, firstly as a young person, and I think my own sort of unique identity, as a woman, as a person of colour, as a Muslim, I think I felt quite intimidated by it because the sort of picture or other kind of stereotype of grant making and spaces, sort of corporate spaces almost, is typically your sort of average white middle class man. And I think I felt very far removed from that. But really I've been proven wrong, I think, throughout this whole experience as to what real grant making and I think that sort of community led approach looks like.
Thank you. And Suranne, Ladajah, what about you? What did you assume grant making would look like before you got involved?
Yeah, I have no idea. I just didn't think about what it would look like on the actual practicalities of it. I still very much, when someone asks me what's grant making, I say I give out money as a simple thing, but it's so much more complex than that. And I do think it is difficult to get your foot in the door if you not knowing what it is or not knowing what to expect.
Suranne, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd certainly echo what Fatima said about the formalities of it. I think I definitely had that sort of in mind, but it's felt a lot more flexible. It's felt like we, as the young people leading this fund, have the actual power to make change, and that's been so fulfilling, and totally not what I really expected. Yeah.
So I'm keen to ask then, because you've used the word power, right? So can any of you share a moment when you realised that this is a space of power sharing, and actually is it a space of power sharing?
Yeah, for me, it was, I assumed, I'm going to be completely honest, when I first got the role, I think it's very easy when you're a young person to assume that things are going to be quite tokenistic and that you're going to be sort of a token young person. But when I realised it was going to be different is when I'm pretty sure it was the first or the second session, there was a whole PowerPoint about how we don't want it to be tokenistic and how we were going to develop sort of I don't know if this is the term we use, but it was like sort of a code of conduct and a code of like ideas between us and between the foundation as well, of what we want to influence, what we want to like be able to have these conversations about. And I think that's been really great because we were involved so early in the process of FCF round 2, which is the fund that we're working on. We were involved so early that we were able to like sort of co-design it, and we were able to have a huge impact in everything when it comes to the criteria, when it comes to interviews, when it comes to shortlisting, and then making those final decisions. The trustees actually gave us a lot of power, which was something that I don't think any of us were really expecting to be given as much as we were. And that was when I think even on the first or second session, I was like, wow, they are really taking us seriously. And I don't know about everyone else, but that isn't something that I'd really experienced before. And that was something for me that has been quite transformative in like my own journey and what I've been learning.
Great. Thank you, Phoebe, for sharing that. So has anyone else had a moment where it's like, yeah, this is power sharing, or maybe it's not power sharing?
I think for me, it was like Phoebe mentioned, especially the shortlisting and the 2 decision-making days that we had. It really felt like the last decision-making day that we had, especially when we were deciding the last couple of organizations, that felt like so much power. And it almost felt a bit daunting. For the first time in its experience, I felt a bit like the weight of the whole experience is really on my shoulders in that moment. And making the right decision felt really important. And like it felt like it had to be done. And even shortlisting and sitting in those interviews, leading the interviews with the organizations. I don't think I've ever had an experience where I've been so like front and center leading something. Even though we are a collective, it felt very individual, felt very personal as well. For me, those were probably the biggest moments in this experience.
Great. Thanks, Suranne. And can I, for our listeners who aren't in grant making and aren't familiar with shortlisting and decision making days, could you speak to like what actually happens on those days? Like what does that actually involve?
So for shortlisting, we had a number of applications from all across the country for our fund that was centered on supporting organizations that supported young people in the criminal justice system. And essentially we shortlisted ourselves. We each individually had a list of organizations that we looked through the application and came to the decision personally on where we would rank particular organizations. And then eventually it came to the day where we all came as a collective together. We've had about 3 or 4 in-person retreats. Even though we are a collective of young people all across the country, it's really great to come in person and make those decisions. So the first decision-making day was that shortlisting, deciding which organizations we would take to interview. The second decision-making day was us deciding post-interview which organizations we'd like to see being funded.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to add anything?
The kind of the energy in the room. I know it's been said already, but I don't even think words can convey just how powerful those moments were. I think sitting alongside each other, the sort of excitement, having sort of the grant makers, the sort of professionals in the room, but actually the young people having all of the decision making and all of the sort of power and influence and just like being meaningfully heard. I think we speak about sort of meaningful participation so much, but like it's amazing when it actually happens and when you actually feel part of it. Yeah, I just wanted to convey that a little bit.
Great. Thank you so much. I guess the next question then I want to ask, and it's kind of similar to the first one I asked, which is, have there been any moments where you felt your voice has genuinely influenced funding decision and or directly influenced the foundation in terms of the way they work?
I can speak to this a little bit. So I have autism, which I was diagnosed with at 17. And basically, I have become really comfortable and confident talking about this throughout my experience with Co-op and with HUDL because I was given the opportunity to do a whole presentation about intersectionality within the criminal justice system, about people who are neurodiverse. So we learned that approximately 33.3% of people within the criminal justice system have some form of neurodiversity. So I was able to give a presentation about my own lived experience of having autism and some of the things that I've dealt with and how that impacts my life, and using that, how that could impact other people's lives, and not just people within, within the criminal justice system and within the funders, but people amongst ourselves as well. And that gave us the opportunity to really like look at some things that we were planning on doing and talk about accessibility. And I feel like Co-op Foundation are really, really good about when you have ideas that come from your own lived experience, saying, oh, wow, that's a really interesting idea. Maybe we haven't had somebody with that experience before. Do you have any more ideas? And they're really open to that. And I think that that's something that's really, really unique and something that's been quite transformative for me. And that's helped me make a difference, I think, when we were shortlisting and when we were interviewing and then finalising things, because I could say, oh, this organisation looks like it has a really big impact on this community, but also within the foundation itself, because I can say how we can make certain things more accessible, how we can have these discussions and facilitate these discussions. And it's not just me that's done things like that. We had a whole session delivered by one of our members, Hannah, about anti-racism and that sort of thing, which was really interesting, and about trauma-informed conversations and how to do that. And that was really, really powerful for us going forward.
Thanks, Phoebe. And actually, I'm really glad that you've brought up lived experience, because this is a question that I wanted to kind of ask and bring to this space now. And the fact is that we have a lot of people and a lot of organizations talking about bringing lived experience to the table. What does that actually mean in practice? Like, what does that mean for you all as individuals? And what do you think it means for other young people?
I think it means there is a value in your lived experience, and it's not just by learned, because we can teach people anything.
Mm,
It through is really some of your foundations and the skills that you kind of breed out of adversity.
mm,
I think for other young people, it means that actually it takes away that pure value from maybe having work experience, maybe having sat or know what grant making is. Actually, if you just have that lived experience
mm,
and willing to kind of understand what skills that has given you, you can really bring that towards into tables like this. But I think the key thing about lived experience is understanding the skills and the being able to advocate for other people, but not necessarily having to still be that person with that experience. Like, you don't have to, that's not your only value in the room.
mm.
You have gained skills from this experience, and being able to actually bring that into the room is valuable as well, those skills.
Thank you. Fatima or Suranne, would you like to add anything to that? Like, what does it mean to be bringing lived experience to the table? What does that actually mean in practice? What have you seen in terms of like the work that you're doing with the collective or elsewhere?
Would love to speak to this. I think, like, so often, systems aren't really, they're designed for young people, but, young people aren't actually involved in the making of them, right? So they're not, actually reflective of what, or inclusive of what young people need. And I think lived experience plays such a big role in that, especially, like, I think in the fund and in the work we've been doing as part of the collective, but also more so, like, within all systems, and within society, I think. And I really like the point Ladajah made about, how it's amazing for the organisations and for these sort of systems to have this experience, but also great for the young people themselves. It's that sort of, for lack of a better word, that sort of transactional nature, I suppose. Everyone gets something out of it. But I think it's just so important that we're sort of centering these voices, but also giving them the right sort of support and the tools to be able to contribute and to contribute safely. I think trauma-informed approaches it's sort of been a word mentioned on this call a couple of times, and I think that certainly comes into it as well.
So I want to stick with you, Fatima, because actually I would be really curious to hear, like, how do we make sure then that lived experience isn't tokenized or over relied on, in your opinion?
I think so. For me, it's having the right support in place, having the right mechanisms. So whether that be the sort of mentoring or the sort of pastoral aspect of it, I suppose it's having the right tools to actually be able to bring your voice. Like, I always think of, like, I think it's Lundy's model of participation, having the right space, the audience, the voice, influence, being given the resources or the training, whatever it is, being sort of incentivized, whether it's through money or, gift cards or just appreciation. I think it's through having spaces like this and having a sort of community and a collective and having that support from each other. I think it is really easy for it to be sort of tokenized, or for it to be just something that's almost like a sort of a checklist box type of thing. But I think when organizations really take the time and really sort of collaborate and hear from the young people and actually consult with them on what would work for them and be flexible around that, that's when the good work happens, for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fatima. Phoebe, Suranne, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of how do we make sure lived experience isn't tokenized or over relied on?
I think it's by caring for the people that give the lived experience as well, because some of the conversations that you have because of that are very vulnerable, and something that's very sometimes like talking about things that are difficult to talk about where in spaces that you haven't been listened to. And I think that the way to make sure it's not tokenized is to showed the value of giving that lived experience, if that makes sense. Like, you're not just giving it, because I think that there's sometimes a sense of like almost like trauma click, when people just want to hear all of the hard things you've gone through. Whereas the way that we do lived experience, it's very much like you're telling us this for a reason. You're not just telling us this to like sort of trauma dump and to relive some things. You're telling us this so that we can make things better, not just for you, but for other people like you. I think in a way it's hard to over rely on lived experience because every lived experience is so valuable and adds something different, even if it is from the same thing that they have lived experience on. Everyone's journey is different. So I'm a big proponent of lived experience, and I think it's important to have as much as we can.
Thank you. Suranne, I saw that you wanted to come in. So do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks. I think for me, it's all about having those access points in the first place, having those avenues to actually like share our voice and see it being enacted in action. And I spoke to this a bit in my interview that you were in, Keji, about how too often young people don't feel as though their voices are valued because, at least from my perspective, I feel as though I've been like overlooked out of preference for more senior or adult voices in a space. And so like I felt so valued in this space where all of us as young people have our say and see our voices being like enacted and being like implemented in the decisions that we're making. And even just having that avenue to do so in the first place is really big and really important. And I think it should be done a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I can't help but want to ask this question, right? As I'm going to ask it anyway. And it's like, when we're thinking about tokenism, there are moments when I've been in rooms and people are like, that's so tokenistic, right? Or I feel tokenized. Could any of you give me examples of what that might look like, or moments where you might be like, that is tokenistic, that is not empowering, that is not power sharing? I feel like there'll be some people who are listening to the podcast who will be like, yeah, actually, it would be really good to know so that I can actually sense check my own practice.
For me, it's when you sort of go to somewhere, you give your time and you give like your ideas, and it's like, oh, we're really grateful for that idea. That was really well said. We're going to do something totally different because of X, Y, and Z, and like not giving you the context before you actually give the ideas, like not taking you on the journey, just having you as a little tiny part of it to sort of tick a box. I think tokenism is a tick box exercise fundamentally. Different like methods of participation, isn't there? There's like co-design, people working together. I think tokenism is literally where you're just doing it to say that you've done it. That's been my experience in some places.
So then in those moments, is it that you feel like they've already taken the decision and it's just having
Yeah.
you there to look like they're listening, basically?
I think it's to look good. I think that's to me what tokenism is. They want to say, oh, we've been influenced by young people without actually having to be influenced by young people. Because I mean, we can all say on this call, sometimes our opinions and what we say is different, even to what the foundation originally thought. But for us, that has caused so many like different decisions to have been taken or different approaches to have been taken. That's why it's not tokenistic, because it's a space where you share the power and where you share the information, and that actually makes a difference. If it was tokenistic, like you would come on, share your idea, and they'd be just like, oh, nice, thanks for your idea. We're going to do this, but your idea was very valuable. That's tokenism.
Thanks, Phoebe. I'm seeing like some smirks and some head nodding. So I'm going to come to you, Fatima. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I was actually thinking of a meeting I was on recently, and I think being asked, to be in the room, to be in the space as a young person sharing their experiences, but I actually wasn't prepped on the meeting at all before it. It was like I kind of turned up. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know, what was going on or what my role is. I think there's so much in that, and then so much in what Phoebe said. I noticed all the smirks. I imagine we've all had experiences where we felt like our engagement has been tokenistic. And unfortunately, it is the case a lot of the time. And I think organisations maybe don't have the sort of confidence and the knowledge into how to sort of meaningfully engage young people. But yeah, it's certainly something I come across a lot.
Thank you. Ladajah, you were about to come in.
Yeah, I was going to really add the same thing. It's like that checkbox exercise. It's that at the end, it's not involving throughout. It's not like growing or learning with us. It's just to allow us to rubber stamp it. It's not just to say, actually, young people found this and this, but actually, it's just not very authentic. And especially when you're brought to events as well. and you may be the only young person in the room, things like that. It's just there to say they had a young person in the room, and it's not actually, there's not a group of us. You're not integrated into the room. There's no provisions put in place. So people actually know why you're there, and actually that you have credentials to be in the room as well. Because it's always assumed that you don't have credentials to be in a room when you're young.
Yeah, that can be hard. That can be very, very hard. I guess that then leads me to the next question, which is around what support needs to be in place for people, for young people, in terms of sharing personal experiences and decision-making spaces. And I know with the Future Communities Fund too, we had to really think about that, right? So it'll be really interesting to hear from you, what support do you think needs to be put in place, either based on your own experience or what you've learned or observed through Future Communities Fund too?
I can speak a bit to that. Yeah, Phoebe also mentioned it a bit earlier on about the fact that we established like a code of conduct before we even embarked on any of the work. Considering this is like my first sort of experience in this space, that was really important for me. Not just because I had this expectation that we were going to even do that in the first place, but that really felt as though like I am valued here, I am safe to share how I feel here. And I think even just the facilitators, everybody that we work with at the Can't Foundation and at HUDL, everybody just feels like a big family. Like we all feel, at least for me, I feel really safe sharing any personal experience with anybody that I work with here because like it all feels so relational. We all feel, I don't know, I feel very safe to share my experiences. I think even like making it clear that it's okay to not share certain things has been important for me too.
Amazing. Thanks, Suranne. Would anyone like to add to that in terms of what support needs to be put in place?
Yeah, I think the boundaries are really key, as Suranne said, and I think that allows it to feel safe and relational. Just have those really there.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think one thing that's really helped for us, I'd say, as part of the collective, has been having regular check-ins, having spaces to kind of reflect on, what's going well, what could be improved, is there any other way we can support you to sort of engage in this work the best that you can? Is there anything that might help? Is there anything sort of going on outside you want to share that might sort of help inform that? I suppose that's where the relationship comes in. I think having that relationship with those around you, with those you're working with, and with those who are kind of supporting you is so important.
And if you don't mind me quickly following up with that, like what do you feel helps to build those relationships? And Suranne, I saw that you wanted to say something, so I'm going to come back right to you in a second. So yeah, Fatima, what do you think helps to build those relationships?
I think for me, it's been, firstly, I think time. We've been part of this sort of work now. I think it's going on 2 years. And it's just the little things. Like I often speak about, a lot of our work is done online. So it's those little conversations before a session starts or at the end of a breakout room or, meeting in person has been really helpful as well. I think having shared interests, having time just to chat, to reflect, not feeling the sort of rush of things. And being really sensitive to each other and each other's needs. If you're not feeling the vibe of the room, or if things are maybe going on, outside in the world as well. There's so much going on right now, and I think being really sensitive to that and how other things might impact people and their ability to sort of participate in a space. So I think being sort of inclusive and empathetic.
Great, thank you so much. Suranne, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add as well, this might not be about support in perhaps the formal sense that you're sort of alluding to, Keji, but it's more so like especially when we were establishing this code of conduct, there was never an expectation that you had to just share in the meeting. There's always been this culture where like even if you didn't have anything to share in the meeting, you could share that afterwards. You could share it in a different way. You could share it through a DM or through a survey or write in a comment on a board, on a Miro board or whatever. And that's felt really great. I think also, as Fatima's sort of speaking about as well, those like informal check-ins, just like having that space to just chat, have it not be so formal, so work focused, has always been great. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. So I want to move us on a little bit. So we've talked about lived experience, and we've also mentioned trauma informed, and that's a word that's kind of come through in everything in what we've talked about so far. So the question I have for you guys is, what does trauma informed practice mean? Like, what is it? So for someone who has never come across this term, what is trauma informed, and how does that show up in this space?
I think trauma informed practice, it's kind of key to when you're talking about sensitive issues or just even talking to people about lived experience, it's kind of key to not re-traumatize the person, not to make them relive any events that may have happened. And so I think for us, it's allowing space for those discussions to happen, also allowing space for check-ins, as we said, to make sure people are actually okay, or having low pressure environments. And it's also kind of looking at people as a whole and understanding other people's experience will be different, especially when you have such a diverse group of people. And I think it's really using that kind of the sense checking of the room to see if everyone's okay and checking that out. But I think it is key to not re-traumatize and also be solution focused, not always problems. So we're not in the room trauma bonding. We're not talking about all these problems, and we actually try and fit in. We talk about our solutions. X was happened and it was bad, but we can now do this to make it better for other people.
So kind of remaining solutions focused as well in that process. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Fatima, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just very much agreeing. I think Ladajah, I remember delivering giving a presentation on trauma informed, which I found really helpful. But yeah, I think it's about safety, it's about trust, it's about sort of empowering the people around you. I think those sort of core principles almost in any sort of group. We've spoken a lot about code of conduct. I think it kind of shapes that as well. It's it's meeting everyone where they're at for me, and understanding everyone, is at a different place, and that can change throughout the day, that can change throughout the course of a meeting, and just responding to that.
I'm curious to ask then, whose responsibility is it then to embed trauma-informed practice in spaces?
Everyone's, in my opinion.
Oh, we got two answers here. Phoebe, go ahead, and I'll come back to you, Fatima.
I think it's everyone's. Obviously, it's the people that are facilitating to make sure that space is set, but it's also everybody participating within the space to make sure that everyone's comfortable and that it is trauma-informed.
Fatima, did you want to add anything?
Phoebe's taking the words right up my mouth.
Really? Well done, Phoebe. Amazing. So then, if we're thinking about being trauma-informed, we talked about it in terms of how that shows up within the collective and our practices. So thinking about when you were working with the criminal justice experienced young people or kind of working in that space, and also just thinking about when you're having to make those final decisions about what grants get funded, how do you kind of hold difficult stories while still making objective decisions?
I think that was something we had to get used to very quickly, because obviously we're working with on grants within people who've experienced the criminal justice system. And some of the stories, I was in a working group with criminal justice experienced young people, and some of those conversations were very difficult. And it was sometimes hard going from that and then going into the shortlisting and then interview stage. Quite a lot of the groups would bring in people that have been impacted positively by their work, which is amazing and really did help us. But that could be really, really, really difficult when you had two organisations, one of which used specific case studies and one of which was more general, but is still doing really good work. And I think it was quite hard, because how can you decide which organisation is better when they're both doing such amazing work? And I think that's something we figured out really quickly, is that it's not about being better, it's been about better for the fund and better suited to what we were offering. And I think that recognising that made things a lot easier, because people say to separate emotions from the work, but I think that's borderline impossible, because it is all about care and it's all about community. And I think that that's one of the things that as a collective, not to be all, but I think we did do that pretty well, because we had the conversations with each other as well. I remember on the last decision making day, which is coincidentally on my birthday, we had some really good conversations within the break. So we'd shortlist from the shortlist, and then we'd have a break, and we'd all check in on each other within the break and be like, "Oh, are you all right? Are you all right?" And I remember they had us these cookie dough chocolate things, and that was very useful as well, because it was okay, we can have this time away from these difficult conversations as well. And I think that that's one of the things that I've really learned, is you can't necessarily separate yourself emotionally, which is difficult, but when you're surrounded by a collective, and that's why I love being part of the collective, you've got so many other people, and not people from the foundation as well, and people from HUDL to lean on. And it is a little pyramid that the cheerleaders go on, where you're all sort of standing on each other's shoulders and only when you do that you can make the triangle. I feel like that's what it's like in those situations, and that's why, we can all help each other with that. If that answers your question, I'm not sure if it does, but
no, it does. It does. I mean, the question was kind of how do you hold these difficult stories whilst making objective decisions? So yeah, no, it absolutely does. Does anyone want to come in and add to that?
I think for me, it's reflections. I'm a social work student, and over the last couple of years, I've had lots of placements, and one of the big things for us has been drilled in the importance of, being a reflective practitioner, reflecting on action, reflecting in action. And I used to very much ignore it because I didn't think I was a very reflective person. But I think especially since doing this work, when we had our listening sessions with the justice experienced young people, it was something that really came in because you do, like Phoebe said, you do feel it. And I guess it's taking time to think about that, think about where these feelings are coming from, where they're present for you. Is that impacting a decision? Is it impacting it in a good way? Could it maybe be taken in a bad way? It's consulting with other people. It's sort of surrounding yourself with your team, speaking to other people, hearing other people's perspectives, owning that sort of emotion you feel and that sort of passion you have, but also being open to challenge. And I think reflection plays a big role, certainly for me, in that.
Yeah, thank you. And when we're talking about like opening up for challenge, I'm sure that there are many people listening to this who were like, what are the challenges like to being in this space and to working in this way and to having young people in grant making? So I'm going to throw that to you guys. What have been the challenges?
for me, it was a very personal sort of, I don't know if imposter syndrome is the correct word, but I think it kind of is, because sometimes I think somebody mentioned it earlier, I can't remember who, but I think it was you, Suranne, like in the last one where we were making the really big decisions, felt very real. And I think you have to remind yourself that ultimately you were picked to be here for a reason and you're doing this for a reason, because it's really difficult sometimes to accept that and to know that, you are learning and that you are at the very beginning of your journey, but that doesn't mean that your insights are less valuable. And sometimes it means your insights are even more valuable. And I think that that's something that took me personally a lot to like sort of get over that fear of not being clever enough, not being, like capable of making these decisions. And for me, it was that personal imposter syndrome, because I've never known anybody who worked within this sector, and I've never had any like grant making experience really before this. So it was acknowledging that, you were picked for a reason, you're here for a reason, and your insights aren't bad, and I think that accepting that personally is a massive step.
Great. Thanks, Phoebe. Who would like to add to that in terms of what, if any, are the challenges for you and or for the collective and been working in this space?
Yeah, I think obviously, as Phoebe said, imposter syndrome is totally something I think a lot of people in this space will suffer if you're making big decisions that are actually quite high stakes. And I think that's something we try to kind of remove that because it can feel a lot of pressure when you realize actually you're making high stakes decisions about people's organizations and everyone is doing amazing work, but you can't give it to everyone. And that is at first, that's a really hard thing to kind of reckon with because it's like you want to help everyone because everyone's doing such amazing work, but you can't. And it's actually you have to prioritize, you have to be kind of a bit brutal, a bit cutthroat. And that's not to say anyone else is doing any less better work than someone else. They may just be better suited. I think that's something you kind of have to really come to terms with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that honesty. What I would like to do is kind of move into talking about accessibility and this space, right? So what do you feel, or what barriers do you feel still exist for young people trying to access opportunities like this? Yeah. So we're often asked to recruit young people from all over the UK and to recruit young people who have no grant making experience, right? So I'm really keen to hear from you what you think the barriers might be for other young people to be able to step into these spaces and to step into these opportunities and to kind of work in the grant making space.
I think the biggest barrier is not knowing. I was even telling some people today about the work we do at FCC, and I was like, oh, how do you get into this? How do you know about these opportunities? And these are university graduates, someone who may be like kind of more plugged into kind of opportunities and looking for things, and they don't know, and they're like, oh, how do you, like, what is this? How did you even get involved in this? I think that is the biggest barrier, is not knowing and
Mm.
not knowing where to start, not knowing how to know. Like, how do you know what you don't know? And I think that is probably the biggest barrier for young people getting involved, especially when we're trying to get young people from probably lower socioeconomic backgrounds. How do we make it known?
Yeah. And how did you know, Ladajah?
Oh,
How did you know? How did you come to be in this space?
I wanted experience. So I started on my first youth advisory board when I was in sixth form. I wanted some experience. It was COVID. So I couldn't really go get a job or things like that. And I saw a youth advisory board advert and I applied to it. And that's how I knew. I was just searching for random stuff. It was very much I stumbled over it.
So did you specifically want a youth advisory role, or you
No,
just wanted
no, of course.
experience
I just wanted experience
in anything?
in anything. I would have took anything, anything.
Right. And then you
So
just kind of happened into the advisory role.
yeah, then I realized there's other advisory roles, and once you know about one, the floodgates open, and you then start to know about all of them, and then it's so easy. But you just have to know about one, and I think that's the biggest thing for it to open.
Thank you. It would be great to hear from others in terms of what other barriers do you think exist for young people trying to access this space?
Yeah, I think this question on barriers is something that we personally as a collective are really grappling with at the moment as we think about recruiting in like the third form for the Future Communities Collective. And I think especially what has cropped up, I think, is the geographic locations of people, making sure that we are nationally representative of young people across the land. So like I am probably not the best example of this at all. I'm based in London, and I guess that's probably given me, I don't know, a lens to look at it from. Like, I'm very privileged to be in this position and I want more young people, perhaps outside, like I do really want more young people outside of London, in the north, in the Midlands, in the south as well, but not so, I guess, centralized to be involved in the work. And also, I think another thing that we are really grappling with, and we were debating about it the other day in our last meeting, was how are we representative of young people that perhaps don't have a background in academia? So all of us in the collective currently have been to university or are currently at university. In the past, I think we've only had one individual that didn't have a university background. And I think if we are to be a collective that is truly representative of young people and are truly effective in our decision making and in affecting change for young people, we need to really think about how we as a collective are diverse and are representing young people as a whole, and as a population. And I think that's something that, like, we are all very privileged to be in the positions that we are in. And I think we want more young people outside of our experiences and outside of these pools to also be involved in the work. So like for me personally, I know Ladajah, you were just speaking about how you got into it. If I'm being completely transparent, I also just wanted a job. So like I applied for the co-op and got a job because I wanted money, to be perfectly honest. I had maybe a tiny bit of interest in community work. And it was only through there that, through my networks, my line manager told me about this opportunity. Had I not been part of the co-op network, I can objectively say I wouldn't have been able to be involved in this work. And this has been like the most fulfilling project of my entire life, and it will always stay with me. It's even informed like the decisions that I've made about my future, because I really see a future for myself in this type of work. And so like I think we really need to think about how we enter spaces where young people perhaps aren't so seen and perhaps don't see these opportunities at all. How do we reach those young people? Because I think we've all been very fortunate to find this opportunity. It's about making sure that more young people can too.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that we're asking across the whole HUDL community. And I kind of feel like we could do an entire podcast on this on its own, in terms of like, how did everyone come into this space? But then equally, like, how do we go out and reach out to young people who are not in this space at all and who might not even ever even go into like Google search and say what's out there, you know? But yeah, it's really interesting to hear. And a part of me is like, so tell me, where did you guys land with your debate? Like, what what were the key things that came up?
That's a really easy question to answer, to be honest, because we
Go on
didn't.
then, Phoebe.
Like, it's a very, very ongoing debate. Like, it was a lot of yeah, but when we were talking about it, because it's not, I don't actually think that any of these debates are something you can fully answer. You can just sort of do your best to be as representative and to give the opportunity to as many people as you can. And I think that that is where, if we landed on anywhere, it was that we really, really want a very representative group.
For me, I found ways in like I've been able to make groups like this a bit more diverse by actually I know neat people in my network or people who like I've known from my background from growing up and actually sending them the opportunities, but not just that, sitting there and writing the applications and helping them really go through it. And they're getting it and they're fine and they're grateful and everything. But I think actually helping them write an application because it's something they've probably never done before, just sending out CVs, and it's something your job centre won't teach you. And it's been like, it's actually okay to go into it because she came out in an interview and was like, everyone speaks like me because they're not used to hearing, if you're not used to hearing people speak very formally, that was a shock and thought she wouldn't get it because of that.
Right.
And she was very happy, but I think it's myth busting. I think a lot of it is, and helping, mentoring.
Definitely. Thank you. Fatima, were you going to add anything before we move on to the next question?
From what Ladajah said, I think there's something as well about the way we recruit as well. I think I remember even when we joined the FCC, we had the option of, sending in a video or doing like a written application. I think having different ways to express yourself, not being stuck in that sort of rigid structure of, you have a written application and you have an interview and it's super formal. I think if we really want to change things up and if we really want to involve young people, then I think we need to be a bit creative about it. So I'd be really keen to see more of that.
That's interesting. I mean, I've done so many recruitment rounds across so many different projects, and I think we are definitely like, we're kind of varying the way in which people can submit their applications, but I think we're still seeing like a heavy lean towards written versus video or voice note. And I remember one time we also did it where we said you can do a creative art piece, but then actually when we tried that, it failed miserably because we were like, wait, hold on, we can't actually assess this person because obviously art is so subjective. It's like, how do we do this? And in the end we were like, you actually still have to write something, like we need to still see something. So I'm curious, I guess, and Phoebe, like you said, some of this stuff it's just all still up for conversation, and it's just about being as diverse as you possibly can. So yeah, definitely, like I'm keen for us to keep exploring those opportunities in those ways. So can I then ask, what for you guys has made your participation possible, both practically and emotionally, in this work?
For me, like practically, and this is a very stupid answer really, but it's been paid. I think that like so many young people are expected to like give up their time for free, and that's really difficult when you're a university student. And it's allowed me to support myself whilst doing the work, which has allowed me to invest a lot of time emotionally and a lot of time in actually doing the work to the highest of my ability because here's a job as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the honesty.
I think majority remote has to hit the kind of ball out of the pot. Ball out of the pot, yeah. I think majority remote has been so helpful, but it doesn't feel so disconnected because we do have in-persons. It's really helpful on the week by week. It's just very easy to participate. It's not hard. And I think that's something that has really made it accessible, the ease of participation, the rhythm, the notice, like we know kind of when it's going to happen. It's something that schedule things around, like things like that just really help.
Thank you, Ladajah. And actually, I'm going to come to Fatima and Suranne. It would be great to hear from you guys as well in terms of like what's made your participation possible practically and emotionally.
Yeah, I definitely have to second what these two have both said. On the note of like being paid, I think it was also a matter of that for me. This is my only source of income. And so like I also agree that I've been able to invest a lot more time than I would have had I not been paid. And I also think, speaking to what we've spoken to about a bit earlier on, about how we've been able to foster such like a friendly culture, that emotionally it's felt like such a joy being here. It really, I say it whenever we're asked, it never feels like work for me. It feels like I genuinely am happy to be here. I am valued. I have my friends here. Like for me, it doesn't feel like work at all. Like even though we are doing quite intense, like you say, high stakes work, Ladajah, like it feels just so good and so fulfilling to be here. And so that for me has kept me going on through.
Thank you. And Fatima, how about you?
I would echo everything everyone has said, actually. I think the flexibility as well has worked really well. I think having meetings in the evening, changing things around and being able to sort of dip in and out of projects as you like. And yeah, like Suranne said, I think she hit the nail perfectly. The connection and the togetherness for me yeah, it's something I genuinely look forward to. And I think, yeah, I'm not alone with that.
Great, thank you. And then I wanted to just ask a few of you to just, if you could speak to like what you've personally gained from being part of the collective.
I've gained so much confidence. Like, I've gained confidence not only in my like ability, but in my ability to learn and my ability to work as a group, which I didn't know that I was going to be able to do that. And this sounds so silly because we're all on the phone, but I've gained the best friends I've ever made in my life. Like, my FCC friends are just amazing. Like, I remember when we all went out on my birthday when we were in the retreat in Manchester. Fatima actually organised that and took us to do karaoke, and we're really good friends outside of work as well, and we all really motivate each other. And even something really silly like we all like each other's Instagram stories or just say well done at the beginning of a meeting when we share some stuff we've achieved. It's just a really beautiful community, and to have gained that community of people from all over the UK who you can just message if I'm ever in Dundee. Fatima, can you please tell me where to eat? Or like, if I'm in London, I'm like, where do I even go in London? It's gaining that's been really transformative for me, no matter how cliche that sounds.
Phoebe, that is so cute.
It is not cliche at all. Thank you so much, Phoebe. Yeah, would anyone else like to share what they've personally gained from being part of the collective?
I can jump in. For sure, the friends, like that is the biggest motivator for me. The friends, just being there, having friendly faces. We're all so excited when we have retreats because that means we can actually see each other in person. Because it's such a long period between the in-person retreats, but it never feels distant on calls. We all still feel really well connected. And I also think like I've gained a lot of knowledge about the space, knowledge that I didn't have and knowledge that I wouldn't have had I not embarked on this project. So much so, like I said before, I actually see a place for myself in grant making. I want to pursue that as a career. Like I enjoy consulting so much in this space as a young person that I might even like embark on it in the future. We came in all, there was the expectation that nobody had advanced understanding of grant making. We all came in with maybe like a basic understanding, and we came from that level sort of playing field, and there was the understanding there. And so everything has essentially been spelled out for us, but that's felt really great because now it's given me so much more vocabulary to speak to other people about the work that we're doing, give me the vocabulary to even like do the work itself. And I think I've just gained so much knowledge, even just in the group with the young people that we're working in as part of the collective, and also from the Cult Foundation staff.
Amazing, thank you. So I've got two more questions before we wrap up. So the first one is, what's one thing you want funders in the UK to hear from this conversation today?
That you can include young people and that it is good to include young people. It's a journey and we've made our plenty of mistakes on the way, but once you get to the floor, you get to the floor, and it is really brilliant for both you and for the young people, and it is possible. And don't be afraid to start, even if you're not really sure where you're going to start, because ultimately is that not what everyone does?
True. Would anyone else like to add anything?
Echoing what Phoebe said, involving young people could be so transformative for your organization and for the young people involved, especially for the young people involved. As you've heard from all of our experiences, we've gained so much from being involved in this work. And so, especially having those access points for young people to be involved, like Phoebe said, have no fear, just get involved with the work, get young people involved, and you'll flourish.
Amazing, thank you. And the final question that I wanted to ask is, what are you most proud of and what are you most hopeful for when it comes to the Future Communities Collective?
I'm most proud of just us as a group. We've all achieved so many little things. I mean, making the final decisions for FCF round 2, I mean, that was a very big moment and one that wasn't really lost on any of us because it felt like a huge moment. But the thing that I'm most proud of is just our group. We're such a good group, and we all so compassionate with each other and so caring, and we just gel so well. And with the Co-op Foundation staff, that's what I'm really proud of. And my future ambition is just more FCC. Like, I love being in the FCC forever.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to welcoming new people and like to share our knowledge, and that will be fun.
Definitely. Thank you. All right. Well, I've got so many more questions and we could go on for much longer, but we only really have the hour. So I want to say thank you for joining us for this episode of HUDL Up, and a huge thank you to today's guests for sharing their stories and insights. If you'd like to learn more about HUDL, explore our work with the Future Communities Collective, or get in touch about involving young people in your program, strategy, or organisation, you'll find links in the description of this episode. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening now, and join us next time as we continue holding space for real stories, shared power, and collective change. See you next time.